January 13th started out like any other Saturday in Hawaii.
So I teach spin classes, and I was teaching an early morning, like a 6:45. It was a beautiful morning, like the sun was just starting to come up. I think I had texted my husband just to see like where they were at, if they were awake yet.
But fears of a catastrophic war, set off by two unconventional world leaders, launched a series of unexpected events.
I was coming in for my shift at 8 o'clock in the morning. Went into the office for the pass down from the midnight shift to the day shift. I heard the call over the secure line. One of my two coworkers picked up the line, and I didn't hear the message because they went against procedures and picked up the receiver instead of putting on a speakerphone. I missed the first part of the message, and I heard, "This is not a drill."
It was like a moment where things are moving really quickly and really slowly all at the same time.
I was convinced that it was real situation, that I was 100% sure. And so I sent out the wireless emergency alert.
We were sitting in the front room there having coffee, and the alert came in, and I kind of looked at it and I said, "It says not a drill."
I was like, this must be a drill.
About 10 minutes after the alert, there was a siren here on the base and an announcement that it wasn't a drill and to take cover. So then I'm like, we should pack up and just move to another portion of the island.
I was calling my husband, and as soon as I heard his voice, I kind of broke down. So then it was like, oh my God, I'm not with him. My boys are alone. I don't think we talked for maybe more than 15 seconds. And I said, you have to get them out of there, get them somewhere safe, and call me back. I thought, I've been told it would be difficult to hit an island, and now it's happening, and I don't have my kids. Sorry, I'm getting a little upset. It was a scary time. Everybody assumed it was from North Korea.
It's credible, right? Because the capabilities of North Korea have advanced very rapidly.
When my husband did call me and let me know that the kids were safe, he ended up finding a culvert in the middle of the field, and they went under the ditch. And then he called me, he said, you have 10 minutes to get here. So the assumption was I needed to get in the car and drive to him. And I was really hesitant. What if? What if I'm stuck in traffic? What if it happens before we think it's gonna happen? Would we survive it at all?
This is not a drill.
You know, if we did get hit with a nuclear missile. And I think I finally called him back and said, I don't think I should go, which was heart-wrenching, but I couldn't see I just couldn't see myself getting there in time.
When you talked to your husband the second time, said you shouldn't go, did you talk to your kids?
No.
Is that hard?
I didn't, yeah, it was hard. Yeah. I didn't know if they understood what was happening, so I didn't want to scare them.
How long before you realized it wasn't real?
Immediately afterwards, the IT people had to come in to create a way to cancel the alert, and that took 39 minutes. With
that knowledge that it wasn't actually happening, it was just this release, you know, just, I was so thankful.
When it turned out that there was no North Korean nuclear missile heading toward Hawaii, fear gave way to outrage. The state's procedures came under scrutiny, and the governor was criticized for being slow to tell the public it was a false alarm.
As we were getting death threats to the agency, it was very stressful for me.
Fault Lines has agreed to protect the identity of the former employee who mistakenly triggered the alert, because he says he fears for his safety. What's been the response directed toward you?
Well, the administrator and I were fired, terminated. And I feel I was made a scapegoat.
Americans at large, I think, were quick to blame the person who pressed the button or the governor that didn't remember his Twitter password. And I think those people did not deserve the blame. They didn't deserve all of the blame.
Who deserved the blame?
I mean, I think we're in this position because of a very aggressive administration. And maybe an unprepared administration.
Hawaii's false alert raised the stakes for Americans at a point when U.S. fears of nuclear war with North Korea were at an all-time high. But in March, President Trump made a decision that virtually no one saw coming. Outside the White House, a South Korean official relayed the news to the world.
President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization.
Trump's high-stakes meeting with the North Korean leader may go down in history as one of the most consequential choices of his presidency.
Who knows what's going to happen? Hey, who knows?
3 months earlier, fault lines had set out to decipher the Trump administration's North Korea strategy. And each time we thought we got it, it was an unexpected twist. For years, North Korea's state-sponsored media had broadcast propaganda glorifying their weapons and threatening war with the United States. In this video from 2016, a nuclear missile strikes the U.S. Capitol. By mid-2017, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un was drawing close to being able to match these nuclear fantasies. Jung Pak was a senior analyst for the CIA. She spent 9 years piecing together intelligence about the North Korean regime before leaving the agency last summer.
Kim Jong-un, since he came to power, did more for the nuclear missiles and ballistic program than his father and grandfather combined. Of course, he inherited an advanced program, so he had a lot to work with. But given his commitment to pegging his legitimacy on the nuclear weapons program and his determination to advance it as quickly as possible, that probably sped up the timeline.
Unlike previous U.S. presidents, Trump answered Kim with his own style of provocation.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen.
U.S. intelligence agencies estimate North Korea already has 20 to 60 nuclear weapons. In September, North Korea celebrated the test of what they claim was a hydrogen bomb. It was their 6th and most powerful nuclear test so far, and the war of words escalated.
The United States has great strength and patience, but if it is forced to defend itself or its allies, we will have no choice but to totally destroy North Korea. Rocket Man is on a suicide mission for himself and for his regime.
미국의 늑살인 미치광이를 반드시 불로 다스릴 것이다.
Then in November, North Korea launched an intercontinental ballistic missile they claim could strike the mainland United States.
They've had nuclear weapons for a while, since 2006. But last year in 2017, when they tested the intercontinental ballistic missiles, that's when the threat perception of the U.S. went up dramatically, right? Because South Korea and Japan have been within missile range for a long time.
Estimates varied, but North Korea seemed to be within months of being able to deliver a nuclear weapon on an ICBM. And Kim was close to achieving his goal.
우리의 핵 타격 사정권 안에 있으며 핵 단추가 내 사무실 책상 위에 항상 놓여 있다는 것, 이는 결코 위협이 아닌 현실임을 똑바로 알아야 합니다.
Trump answered with a tweet boasting about the size of his own nuclear button.
President Obama told then President-elect Trump that this would be an issue that would occupy much of his administration because it was a challenge, told him that in fact we needed to work on deterring North Korea, on reassuring our allies, but they took that in a very different direction.
Among the Washington insiders who struggled to grasp Trump's policy is John Wolfstall.
I've been working on North Korea policy for almost 30 years. I can't tell you what the U.S. policy is towards North Korea.
He was special assistant to President Obama and senior director for arms control and non-proliferation at the National Security Council.
Past administrations don't always get it right, and Lord knows the Obama administration made mistakes, but we really worked hard to try to coordinate our message. Here it seems this administration, even a year in, has trouble coordinating the most basic strategy for communications. Are we open to dialogue or not? Are we prepared to negotiate or not? Are there preconditions for our discussions with North Korea or not?
We've said from the diplomatic side, we're ready to talk anytime North Korea would like to talk. And we're ready to have the first meeting without precondition. Let's just meet.
We're willing to sit down and have conversations with them, but now is not the right time. Our policy has not changed.
We've heard not only conflicting signals from the administration, we've heard conflicting statements from the same official on the same day.
If there was any condition at all to this, is that, look, it's going to be tough to talk if in the middle of our talks you decide to test another device.
Maximum pressure and engagement is the phrase the Trump administration uses to describe its North Korea policy. But a range of experts we spoke to agreed it was hard to square their messaging with any given policy at all. Bruce Klingner was the CIA's Deputy Division Chief for Korea and is a senior research fellow at a prominent conservative think tank.
Those of us who follow Korean issues in Washington are often confused as to what the Trump administration's policy is, particularly in preventive attack, as well as any preconditions or conditions for diplomatic engagement or negotiations with the North.
At the State Department, Joel Witt was in charge of implementing the 1994 agreement that slowed the progress of North Korea's weapons program before it fell apart.
I have no idea what they're trying to signal because they're not sending, a single message. They're sending multiple messages.
Suzanne DiMaggio directs a policy dialogue with North Korean government representatives and has met with them at least 10 times in the past 2 years.
What do the North Koreans say to you when these kind of weird messages come out from the U.S.?
They make it very clear that, of course, they're following everything that's happening in Washington. They watch cable news. They read the president's tweets. And frankly, they're as confused as any of we are.
For 15 years, Frank Januzzi served as the policy director for East Asian Affairs at the U.S. Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
The Trump administration isn't just confusing Pyongyang, they're confusing our allies too. The South Koreans are confused and uncertain about where the hell the United States is headed.
Almost 70 years ago, the United States waged a merciless air campaign against North Korea, backing the South in the Korean War. To this day, the two sides have never signed a peace treaty, only an armistice. Washington doesn't maintain formal diplomatic relations with Pyongyang, and no sitting U.S. president has ever met with a North Korean leader face-to-face. There's no official military communication.
The chairman of the Joint Chiefs in the United States can pick up the phone and talk to his counterpart in every other country on the planet that has nuclear weapons, except for North Korea, the one we're most likely to go to war with. So we don't have that steady personal relationship and communication chain. And so we've tended to err on the side of caution and reserve in the United States, which is why I think many people were worried that President Trump's statements over the last year could lead to either an unintended conflict or an escalation on the part of the North Koreans.
There are unofficial channels to help bridge the communication gap. One is North Korea's mission to the United Nations in New York. Another is known as Track 1.5, meetings between North Korean officials and policy experts like DiMaggio, who are unaffiliated with the U.S. government.
What does it seem like they really want the Trump administration to know?
So they see the United States as an enemy. They make very clear that we are still in a state of war. And they also point to other examples of countries that have given up their nuclear programs, and look what happened to them. The case of Muammar Gaddafi comes up quite a bit. They want the Trump administration to know that they have built this program, put the resources into it, because they want to deter an attack from the United States.
Others see a more aggressive intent. They maintain North Korea has built its nuclear weapons program to force the reunification of the Korean peninsula.
I don't think that the North Koreans want a peaceful coexistence with the U.S. I do believe that the North Koreans want the U.S. off the peninsula.
Since 2016, the U.S. has intensified attempts to isolate North Korea and force the regime to abandon its nuclear weapons program. The Trump administration is pursuing these efforts through their maximum pressure campaign. They've tightened sanctions and imposed financial restrictions to cut off Kim's regime, not just from the materials needed to build nuclear weapons, but from most sources of revenue. And they've pressed other countries to do the same, often working through the United Nations.
North Korea is following what they call the Byungjin line, right? It's a dual-track line. Nuclear weapons on the one hand, economic development on the other. And the international community is basically trying to convince North Korea you can't have both. You can't have guns and butter.
Kim's dual goals may be increasing the domestic costs of international isolation, making the regime more vulnerable to sanctions.
Kim Jong-un has focused a lot on these projects like water parks, dolphinariums, ski resorts, which is so incongruent with what we know of North Korea, where we have 24 million plus people who are living in poverty, who are food insecure, and we have these upper class, high class, modern, upscale types of places. So that's the image that Kim Jong-un wants to project, but it's also his weakness, I think, because maximum pressure and sanctions are occurring at a time when expectations are higher than before.
So we have a posture of maximum pressure. and the promise of engagement at some ill-defined future date. But what we don't see really is a strategy designed to get those talks started. We don't see any evidence that the administration has thought through what they would be prepared to give to the North to accomplish denuclearization. It's as if they expect a surrender.
As 2018 rolled around, President Trump and some of his top advisors seemed to be preparing for action more ominous than sanctions and making the case for war.
Past experience has taught us that complacency and concessions only invite aggression and provocation. I will not repeat the mistakes of past administrations that got us into this very dangerous position.
With all options on the table, the White House was reported to be weighing preventive strikes. David Adams is a retired U.S. Navy captain who once commanded nuclear submarines in the Western Pacific. He's among the observers who argue that a limited strike on North Korea would send a warning that Kim Jong-un can't ignore.
I'm not talking about trying to roll back their whole capability. I'm talking about letting him know that firing another missile toward Guam, the United States, or Japan is not going to be accepted, and not letting him do that, and gauging his reaction to that.
It's an outlier position that's gained currency in Trump-era debates about how to deter North Korea.
So using measured military response, such as a cruise missile strike on his missile sites, would tell us if he struck south as people fear and started a wider war, well, we're better to have that war now.
North Korea has thousands, perhaps 10,000 artillery tubes within range of Seoul. By even the most conservative estimates, within a day, hundreds of thousands of people would die just from conventional artillery fire.
Isn't that an enormous risk to take?
There is some calculated risk, but how does that risk compare to the ability that once he has ICBM-capable nuclear weapons of destroying us, as we talked about here in Hawaii or Los Angeles, instead of several 100,000 people, which he holds at risk now, would be millions of people.
But to most long-standing observers, the prospect of military strikes was cause for alarm.
Total madness. A first strike of nuclear weapons by the United States against North Korea would be an unnecessary, horrific crime against humanity. A limited strike would accomplish nothing and would risk escalation to nuclear war. So we have no good military options.
If there's a bloody nose attempt that escalates into a war, everyone says, well, yeah, we'll win. Yeah, sure, we'll win, but there'll be millions of people dead. There'll probably be the use of nuclear weapons by North Korea, and maybe by us too. And the economic disaster will be global. It won't just be South Korea, it'll be Japan and South Korea. And so you're talking about probably sending the world into a depression.
After months of threats, Seoul was worried that Trump would launch an attack on North Korea, provoking retaliation against the South. President Moon was quick to accept when Kim Jong-un offered that the North participate in the Winter Olympics in Pyeongchang and welcomed Kim's sister to the Games. As Olympic season came to an end, Moon sent a high-level delegation to Pyongyang to prepare for talks between the two leaders, the first since Kim Jong-un took power. Kim surprised the South Koreans by hosting dinner himself. Satisfied, the delegation returned home, only to appear at the White House a few days later with a shocking announcement.
In our meeting, North Korean leader Kim Jong-un said he is committed to denuclearization. Kim pledged that North Korea will refrain from any further nuclear or missile tests, and he expressed his eagerness to meet President Trump as soon as possible. President Trump appreciated the briefing and said he would meet Kim Jong-un by May to achieve permanent denuclearization.
Kim Jong-un's invitation was unexpected, but it was Trump's move that really took everyone off guard.
A lot of people thought we were going to war, and all of a sudden they come in, they say, we're going to have a meeting, and there's no more missiles going off, and they want to denuclearize.
Trump had consulted no one, and he didn't alert his Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, who had advocated for diplomacy with North Korea.
Hey, who knows? If it happens, if it doesn't happen, I may leave fast, or we may sit down and make the greatest deal for the world and for all of these countries, including, frankly, North Korea.
Within days, Trump fired Tillerson and replaced him with Mike Pompeo, a hardliner who's championed regime change in North Korea.
I was surprised about the announcement that it could happen so quickly. What nagged at me was that it seemed so unlikely for Kim Jong-un to say all those things that the South Korean envoy said that he said.
The idea of a Trump-Kim meeting never really crossed my mind, so I was surprised. But on the other hand, I'm not surprised he accepted it quickly because it's a very dramatic event. It's like a reality TV show.
When it came around, nobody thought that this was going to be the form that diplomacy was going to take. We thought you might have the special representative go and meet, maybe the Secretary of State would go and meet. You generally don't see the president putting himself out there on the line and the reputation of the United States on the line so quickly and easily. But this is Donald Trump's style. He doesn't trust his Secretary of State. He just fired him. He doesn't trust the bureaucracy. He thinks he's the only person that matters. That's a quote from him. And so he thinks he can just pull this off.
Does Trump deserve some credit here?
I think he deserves credit in the sense that he is trying something different from what previous administrations have done.
What does Trump need to do to prepare for this?
Well, he probably needs to do a lot of things that he doesn't normally do, which is he needs to really study, he needs to know the issues, he needs to understand what U.S. interests are. He probably should talk to people who have actually talked to North Koreans.
The summit announcement raised a long list of questions. Where would the two leaders meet? Would they get along? And above all, what would be the outcome? What's the best case scenario?
Well, the best case is all the experts have it wrong, that North Korea is actually much more malleable because of the threats and or the economic pressure, that Kim Jong-un comes to the table basically saying, you know, you got me. I'm here to negotiate it away. I would like something in return, but I'm in a much weaker negotiating position than before.
But no one thinks that's actually going to happen. At stake is what Kim means when he says he's willing to discuss denuclearization and what he'll expect in return.
When he talks about denuclearization, it's very different from our definition of denuclearization. The North Koreans in the past have talked about denuclearization as denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula, or when the U.S. security threat is removed from the peninsula. Those are non-starters for Washington.
Removing the U.S. security threat could mean a whole range of things, including ending the U.S. nuclear alliance with South Korea, which Trump may simply refuse.
Where I think this is likely to end up, if we do have a summit, and this could go off the rails at any time, is that we will meet. Kim Jong-un will say, look, we offered to denuclearize. All that the United States had to do was stop threatening us. They refused, and now we're going back to supporting our own national security, our own national defense, and advancing our nuclear program, and blame it on Trump.
On the other hand, Trump and Kim could use this high-profile summit to launch a negotiation process.
The main thing is to continue talking on the main objectives of both sides. Denuclearization for us. For them, it's ending the U.S.'s hostile policy towards North Korea.
Then there's the possibility that Trump, given his America First agenda and his tendency to trust his gut over experts and advisors, might make a deal that leaves U.S. allies in the lurch.
I mean, one fear is that President Trump will agree to withdraw American troops from the Korean Peninsula. Well, that's not something that should be recommended. He shouldn't be doing that, but who knows what he's going to do, and that's the problem.
Tipping the odds back toward war is Trump's new national security advisor, John Bolton, a longtime advocate of regime change in North Korea. He's made the case for preventive war, and as a paid pundit on the president's favorite TV channel, Bolton hailed the summit as a shortcut to military action.
If you look at it as a way to foreshorten the amount of time that we're going to waste in negotiations that will never produce the result we want, which is Kim giving up his nuclear program, I think that's a good thing.
In this most dangerous scenario, President Trump, expecting capitulation, could lash out when Kim refuses to give up his nuclear weapons on the spot.
Perhaps a worst case is the administration goes in with a very maximalist position. I want everything, I'm giving nothing, hand it over.
They dig in their heels, and we can only have confrontation. President Trump says, well, I've done diplomacy. Everybody said diplomacy with North Korea doesn't work. So now we're back to locked and loaded and fire and fury.
So has this turn of events given you a clearer understanding of the Trump administration's policy?
It really hasn't, and I say that because there's a negotiation that's about to begin, and I don't know what our negotiating position is. I don't know what our bottom lines are.
If the leaders of the United States and North Korea do meet in the weeks ahead, it seems likely that the outcome will be driven by personality, not policy. The stakes for millions of people within range of both countries' nuclear weapons are as high as they can be. President Trump may enjoy the high-risk gamble, the ratings, and the next surprise reveal. But he'd do well to remember that this is not a drill.
I think I just want to know that the actions of the administration are not going to antagonize North Korea to the point where we're put in that position for real this time. I think that's all. However that has to happen, that's what I would want.